The Census Bureau is probably best known for its survey of Americans produced every 10 years. But the agency does more than that. It produces massive amounts of data about the American people and the American economy. With thousands of statisticians, economists, and other employees, Census is modernizing while continuing to do its work laid out in the U.S. Constitution. I'm Ross Jean-Fortuné, GovCIO Media and Research Senior Staff Writer. Today on GovCast, Census Bureau Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer Ron Jarmin joined me to talk about how technology is changing the Census Bureau's work, including data collection, analysis, and presentation. Ron Jarmin is the U.S. Census Bureau's Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer. He joins me now to discuss modernization, data, and technology at Census. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
The Census Bureau, more than anything, is a data organization. So how do you collect the best data and get it to the public most effectively?
That's a great question. And I'd say we actually use multiple modes of gathering the raw data from which we construct the statistical products that we release to the public and data users of various stripes. So obviously one of the ways we do that is collecting surveys and censuses. So everybody's familiar with every 10 years we do the decennial census, and that's, sort of a traditional data collection from households across the country. We also have other surveys that collect data from households. Some of those surveys are in person. Some of them are over the internet. Some of them might use things like the phone. But we also have a number of surveys that we collect data from businesses as well. But one of the things that we've also used for many years is administrative data that we get from other government agencies like the IRS or the Social Security Administration. But increasingly, especially for our sort of business data products, we're using data that we get directly from either companies themselves or from aggregators that enables us to produce more timely and more granular data than we can accomplish using surveys.
I want to pull on that a little bit because you're talking about data collection that I think people may not be completely familiar with. Privacy, interoperability, how do those fit into getting data from businesses and different places like that?
When we do surveys, the data collections that we do under our authorizing statute, the Census Act, or Title 13, if you will, protects the confidentiality of those data, whether it's for households or for businesses. And then obviously many of the other government agencies that we get data from have privacy provisions in their laws as well, like the IRS, for example. And then when we make agreements with companies to get their data, they often similarly have some provisions in the MOUs that we have with a company about not releasing identifiable data. So the notion that the data we bring in is identifiable, okay, that it identifies individual households, individual people, individual companies, but the statistical products that we put out do not, okay? And so that's the key, and sometimes the value added that the Census Bureau provides is it brings in this rich data that describes the activities of businesses and households in fairly good detail. But then we take that, we aggregate that up, synthesize it, maybe link it to some other things, and create sort of the value-added data products that policymakers need, that businesses need to make decisions, and that even typical households, making decisions like where to send their kids to college or kids writing their 8th grade term paper, dive into that data to make good use of it.
You just mentioned who uses this information, who uses census data from the people moving into a new community to policymakers. How has that changed? You've been in this research world for a fairly long time. How has that changed at Census over the years, and how is it changing going forward?
Well, I've actually been at the Census Bureau for 32 years, several of those as a sort of an internal data user, if you will, as an economist at the Center for Economic Studies. And I'd say, if you look at the evolution of official statistics, whether at the Census Bureau or any of the other federal statistical agencies, our programs are really constructed to solve government needs. Okay, so the census is in the Constitution. It It's how we reapportion the Congress and states do redistricting. So this very fundamental government function. But even things like the current population survey, where the unemployment report, every first Friday the BLS releases the employment situation, we get unemployment rate, labor force participation. That was really driven by needs of the government, coming out of the Great Depression. I think increasingly over time, even in the 20th century, but much more so now with more powerful computers and really more probably data literacy amongst other sort of institutions and individuals across our society. So the media uses data more intensively than it used to, but in particular academic researchers, but also businesses use a lot of data. And so what we produce has been, was sort of designed for government uses, but increasingly used by these other uses. And so, over the last maybe, decade or so, I think the agencies have become more aware of needing to optimize our data products for these new users, as opposed to just letting them, consume what we originally designed for government uses. And I think that's brought a sort of a whole new level of interaction between the agencies, including the Census Bureau and our data users, to try to design data products that are fit for particular uses. So, we have a program that was started at where I was an economist that provides access to the confidential microdata to sort of expert academic users to use in scientific research. That's sort of like one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is people that just get something off the internet, maybe not even directly from the Census Bureau. So people are consuming our data often when they read newspaper reports or see something on the news. But also, many come to our website to get a few quick facts about their community. Whether it's a church trying to make some plans for expansion or something, or a business trying to locate and know where skilled employees might be nearby, those sorts of things. So trying to figure out how do we produce data products that make those sorts of tasks easier for those folks, and as opposed to, when we used to put this data out in public libraries and bound paper volumes, there was, it's one way, and everybody had to make sense of that. The internet makes it possible to design different tools and products for particular uses. Now, that's expensive on our end, and we really, our structure and our budgets haven't caught up with this notion of how you would optimize data use for particular uses. But I think that's the direction we're going to need to go in the future, because I think that's, we've got a much more diverse user base than we had, 20, 30, 50 years ago.
You set me up perfectly to talk about budgets and modernization, and particularly when you have all this information that needs to be processed, we get into the quasi-hot topic of the last few years, artificial intelligence. So obviously modernization, these kinds of digital tools are important. How do you balance that with the budgets that may not have kept up, and how are you trying to move forward and innovate in ways to use these technologies to bring the Census Bureau into the future?
Well, I think in one sense, we view these technologies as a way to stretch our budgets. So I'll give you an example sort of on the processing side. It's not really the generative AI that you hear about in the news all the time, but just sort of traditional machine learning approaches to classification and sort of organizing our data and helping our data users. So in the most recent 2022 economic census, when businesses were sent the invitation to fill out the census, one of the first things we need to know is what industry the business is in, because that's going to matter for the set of questions that we ask them. So we ask a completely different set of questions of a bakery than we do a shoe store or a plastic injection molding plant, right? So we need to know precisely what industry you're in. And so we had a tool that, kind of like people see these things online, that sort of almost like a chat bot kind of thing that walks them through a series of questions that then very accurately places their business in the right category and gets the right question. We used to have a really good guess of that, but maybe not quite as elegant as this solution. And we would mail out these forms, and then we would learn that the company was not in that industry, and we would get the form back and then have to resend them. Okay, so this is a kind of a way that these technologies help us save time and resources, so that we can redivert those resources to other aspects of data collection and processing. So first and foremost, I think we see these tools as a way to improve our efficiency, much like other organizations throughout the economy. So our coders use them to write code, just like people at Google does or whatever. I think one of the challenges that we face, though, is we know that on our external facing side, where people are interacting with the data products we produce, that we need to make our data more visible to these AI, especially generative AI tools that are out there. So, if somebody asks a question about the demographic or economic characteristics of their community to ChatGPT or one of these other large language models, is that going to return, accurate, reliable information? And it's only going to do so if these models kind of understand how to access and answer these questions with our data in the right way. And so that's something that we're working on. I think that's maybe a little bit bigger task than using some machine learning and some of our internal operations. But I think that's something that we definitely see a need on, and obviously would be looking to other experts outside, whether from these companies or academia or wherever, to help us figure out how to do that.
What is the role of partnerships in this kind of work to make sure that all these systems work well with academia, industry? How are you working that?
First of all, we've been doing partnerships for decades. And some of the most important ones are, we partner with a number of federal agencies to do data collection either with them or for them. And so that continues. So I mentioned the current population survey. We do that in partnership with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a particularly important partnership for a particularly important set of economic indicators. But we also work with a number of other agencies to do data collection and processing. We've worked with academia for decades. The whole concept of GDP and the national income product accounts and sort of the suite of economic statistics that we produce was largely a collaboration between academics and Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Bureau of Economic Analysis, or earlier versions of the BEA. Going back to like the 20s and 30s, and so that's enormously important. I think where we're seeing these partnerships grow is much more on the private sector, and so one of the great examples of something that we're doing right now is we're working with SAP to get directly from the SAP software tool the information that we ask companies for from the economic census, and getting that on a much more current basis than once every 5 years, at least once a year, maybe more. And this is, the software makes this much easier. Companies are interested in doing this because it makes their compliance operations with filling out our surveys much more efficient. We get much more standardized data that we can then, process into our statistical products. And obviously that this is just, one example of several things that we're working on with the private sector, where we're sort of treating, at least on the business side, this as opposed to arm's length transaction where we send them a survey, they query a database, they send us the answer. We're now in partnership with them where that database, almost in an automated way, is providing us with the raw data we need to produce our statistical products. And that's more efficient for them. It's more efficient for us. But most importantly, it's better for the data user because it gives us more accurate, more granular, more timely economic statistics. And so I think this is kind of one of these win-win-win sort of things. But again, it's not costless. One of my predecessors here used to say that we have to fix the plane while it's in the air. So while we're coming up with these new ways and new data products, we also have to continue producing what we've been doing. And so again, that's been done through cost savings and other things. But it is where how fast we can move forward is sort of a function of the resources that we have here. And in particular, when I say resources, I'm really talking about not only the number of staff, but the sort of the skill level and experience of our staff. And so, like lots of organizations, we lean on a relatively small group of people really, really hard, and they get lots of great stuff done. But our staff from the folks that go out in the field, to the people that process the data, to our statisticians and demographers and economists that help produce the data products, we're trying to make this work faster and better, but we're also doing it while we're continuing to produce the products that we've been producing for years. So,
yeah, the proverbial building the plane in flight scenario certainly I know is a sort of landmark of life in the 21st century, especially when it comes to technology. But you talked about recruiting and training, upskilling people. How is that going? And is that famously it's sort of let's say not the quickest process to hire people for agencies. So how do you sort of manage that to get them in such a fast moving world?
It's a continuing project. So I would say that, we've even innovated in this space a little bit. We spearheaded, we kind of led a consortium of other agencies around the government a few years back to get the Office of Personnel Management to create a data scientist job series in the federal government. That was, one of the things that our HR department was key and instrumental on. So when you're thinking about the parts of agencies that lead innovation, sometimes it's even places like your HR department that come up with ways to move the ball forward. But the Census Bureau and I think some of the other stat agencies are, look, our pay is not the same as the private sector, but our mission is I think of interest to a lot of folks in the statistical and data science fields and the applied social science fields. And so, and our data are great. Okay. And so we've been able to, sort of recruit and even further skill up folks that are interested in working on our mission. A few of us stick around for a long time because once you get the data in your veins, it's kind of hard to walk away. But I think that's really how places like the Census Bureau get this done is that the folks that come here and the folks that thrive here are really those who are about the mission, about economic and social measurement for the country, about making that better. And so, they geek out and they have a good time. And so, it's finding those sorts of folks. I think that is always kind of what's helped us, keep up a bit. I wouldn't say we're at the forefront of technology, but, a lot of our ability to stay close is because, a subset of the really smart folks in the economy love our mission and they love working here. And so I think that's kind of how we do it. But, we've, done a lot of work internally to provide, training to our existing staff. And then we obviously recruit, professional staff and IT folks and stuff like that, fairly aggressively, out of both undergraduate and graduate degree programs. So.
I have to imagine the Census Bureau is kind of a wonderland for someone who is interested in data science and things like that. Certainly, there's no shortage of sandboxes to play in, I'm sure.
The public sees the products that come out the door, and they sometimes see the data collection activities. Although obviously with administrative data and third-party data, they don't see that as much. But that also helps keep the burden on them down. But I think, in terms of, fixing the plane while it's in the air, there's a number of investments that we're kind of making internally that, aren't as sexy to the data user in terms of, trying to provide a common business ecosystem for all of our statistical programs to work from, to make the data available to different sets of SMEs across the program. When we're really a survey kind of organization, things were in these sort of survey-centric vertical silos, and we're trying to, liberate the data across our programs, let SMEs bring the best data to bear for the statistical problem that they're trying to solve. And so, that doesn't happen without some purpose-driven investments in our computation infrastructure, in our sort of data management infrastructure. And those things are kind of, they're not as cool as doing a new, real-time pulse survey during the pandemic or something like that. But without doing those things, we can't do those innovative data products. And so you can't have one without the other. And so I think when you're thinking about, the infrastructure and the support that the statistical system needs, not just the Census Bureau, but the other agencies as well, it's really kind of these different layers. It's the public facing layer, it's the data collection layer, but it's also this middle layer where we turn that data that we collect into those public facing data products.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, I'm sure. I appreciate you doing this.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to GovCast. If you like what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice, and don't forget to tell a friend. We'll be back next week with a new episode on the GovCIO Media and Research podcast feed. But until then, I'm Ross John Fortuna. GovCast, along with HealthCast and Cybercast, is a production of GovCIO Media and Research. To explore our content, visit our website, govciomedia.com. Keep an eye out for new episodes each Tuesday, and if you like what you heard, please leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss, send us an email at newsletter@govcio.com.